Hi, Alexander, and thank you so much for joining us in the Expat Life series. I very much welcome you here, and I hope you're doing well. First of all, I really want to jump in straight into the questions. So where are you an expat from?
Yeah, thanks, Greg, and hi, and thank you for having me. I come from Kazakhstan.
Wow. And why did you choose to move to Germany?
It was quite simple. I found a job here, and my employer is located in Cologne. I was presented with a choice where to move in Germany, but I thought that it might be good to stay closer to the main office. So that's how I got here.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. And I'm curious to know, like, how difficult was it to find accommodation in this process of becoming that expat? Did you find a short-term solution to start before moving into your own place, like a hotel?
Yeah, sure. My first thought was to use something like Airbnb, and probably that was the only service I was well aware of. But then the relocation partner of my employer suggested to look to some other options. And one of them, and probably the top first of them, was the Homelike. They suggested to use either this service or some others. The main thing that they asked to look for was whether a landlord that I could find through these services was willing to provide me with the approval to be registered in the
Right.
apartment. The whole life that I tried offered me several options, and probably the first option that I chose was fine enough. And so I had no problems in using that short-term accommodation. And yeah, basically first month that I spent in Germany was in that short-term housing.
Right. Right. Okay, cool. So did you find that Homelike offered you the ability to register your address, but was it that Airbnb couldn't do that?
As far as I'm aware, generally, Airbnb landlords are not willing to do that. It's more of a luck to find one that would provide you with this registration approval. So it may be a major hassle to try to look for a short-term accommodation on Airbnb. So probably using other services, especially services that pay attention to these very detail, would be better for an expat.
Right. Right. So that must have been quite a learning for you as well, like understanding the process behind how the registration works and, if you can get it here or there. But aside from the accommodation, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you face when moving to Cologne?
Actually, one of the most interesting challenges was to get used to a invoice culture. And here is something that may be absolutely unfamiliar to people from Western Europe, but for people from Eastern Europe or even further, it's quite a new thing. If a person is used to an environment where everything is paid upfront, like when you cannot get any services until you pay for it, you develop a custom to feel free to abandon service up to any point until you have paid for it. And that's sometimes not how it works in Germany, because sometimes when you have stated that you possess some interest to services, you may reach a certain point where a service is already set in motion. And the invoice that is sent to you then, well, not to pay it is not a good option also, because it may worsen your credit history, I believe it's called. Yeah, Schufa, what was called in German. And whoa, that's not something you would like to mess with. So
Right.
yeah, that was an interesting concept to wrap my head around. And so, yeah, I needed some time and some, well, not bad tries, but still some experience to understand how it works.
Yeah, understood. Understood. And were there any other challenges that you faced with the transition?
Well, not really. It's not my first time in Germany, so I was somewhat aware of what to expect. Like, usually people sometimes get a little bit irritated or intimidated by practices of garbage separation, but that was not a new thing for me. So, for instance, it wasn't a real challenge. Aside from that, actually looking for a more permanent accommodation was the challenge.
Right,
It's,
right.
it's
And how did that go? Like, what was your process?
It seems I got really lucky. A German friend of mine told me, like, during my first week here, that I should hope not to find a permanent or a long-term housing quickly. It didn't mean that I shouldn't look for it, but that I should not to raise my hopes high. And boy, was he right, because it really was, well, competitive, as my HR said. Yeah, it was. So I needed some time to understand that here it's, in a way, it's similar to the process of looking for a job. The market is so inflated, the demand is so high, and the supply is so limited, then the faster you respond to a new good offer that you see on any website that is dedicated to long-term apartments, the faster you respond and the better you explain something about yourself and so on, the higher are your chances that a prospective landlord or landlady will see your response and will react to it. And after that, if you get lucky, you get invited to an interview. I mean, to an apartment scene or to an apartment tour. And it's basically a first interview, a screening interview, like in the process of looking for a job. And then, if you get lucky again, and if a landlord or landlady you to be a good prospective tenant, they may send you an offer. I mean, they may suggest you to look, to send all other papers and to look into them and so on and so forth. So the faster you react and the more responses you send, the higher are your chances. And that probably would be my main recommendation to any expats new to big German cities. If you treat it as a job hunt, well, an apartment hunt, I finally understood why they called that way. And the more responses and the more reactions you make, the higher your chances are. And probably if somebody would ask me to give any other piece of advice to new expats, I would definitely suggest to look for a short-term apartment, no less than for 2 months. Because 1 month was, well, it was quite a race. And I really got lucky that I managed to find a long-term apartment.
Right. So were you satisfied with your apartment with Homelike and the experience you had?
Yeah. The process, as far as the home life was involved, was absolutely smooth. I was able to contact my prospective landlord, and the pictures that I saw on the home life website, they were absolutely adequate. I mean, I got exactly what was posted and was described in photos. So I was quite satisfied with what I got.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing is you would suggest for any new expats coming into Germany in particular to not try to find long-term accommodation straight away, but to consider services like Homelike for a short-term period to give you a foundation to start looking for long-term accommodation. Is that right?
Oh, well, yes, that's quite correct. To add some details, I'm not saying that you shouldn't start looking for a long-term apartment since the very moment that you got to Germany. You probably will be a person probably would be absolutely unable to do it while not being in Germany, because taking part in these apartment tours and so on is the thing. And so having an ability to meet a prospective landlord, landlady is a major factor as well. But one should not expect that to happen fast. And that's why to get a short-term apartment, at least for 2 months, is, well, yeah, that's a solid advice that I would give. And in order to do that, to find a short-term apartment, yes, services such as the Homelike, they are quite fine. I'm not well aware of other services, but yeah, the experience that I had with the Homelike was absolutely satisfactory.
Great. Oh, that's great to hear. I'm pleased that you had a good experience with us. And I'm really pleased to hear that you actually found a longer term solution as well, fairly quickly, I believe. So that's great. So now that you're in Cologne, what would you say is the best part of your experience being here?
Okay. My answer is going to be a little bit weird, at least to a German ear. because I really love public transportation system. I do know all the hustle around Deutsche Bahn and all the mocking that is made to Deutsche Bahn for being sometimes not exactly punctual, but the system itself, how it's built and how you basically can reach any part of the city and some of the suburbs in 30 to 40 minutes. So yeah, that's quite a good thing. I really like it about Cologne. I'm pretty sure that it's not a unique city in terms of a well-built public transportation system, but that's what I do enjoy here. And the architecture, I mean, if one is into Catholic cathedral architecture, well, that's a good place to get some sightseeing.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I really like that part of Cologne. It's very, very simple and quick to get to anywhere you want to go. And so how would you describe the quality of life in Cologne now?
It's certainly higher on average to what I've used to. I could describe the quality of life. In general, it's probably higher to what I've seen in some other parts of the world, so to speak. Maybe you can give me some clue in what can I use to express my
Well,
impressions on the quality of life.
well, I would say the healthcare system is really good here.
Probably that's what I've heard. Luckily, had no issues with that, and had no opportunity, so to speak, to check it myself. And actually, exactly want to do that as
Yeah.
long as I can. But yeah, I've heard that. Well, public transport is good as I told you. It seems that the amount of taxes that are paid, I mean, Germans usually describe themselves as people paying lots of taxes. And it seems to be fairly true. But from what I see around social services and municipal services and so on and so forth, I basically see where these taxes can go to. So that's not something that bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And so if you had your time again, would you do anything differently?
I would definitely open a bank account earlier that I came here, because there were some options to do that before I came to Germany that would make some things easier. Well, that's for starters. If I would find a short-term accommodation that would satisfy my other needs, I would probably rent an apartment not for 1 month, but for 2. It's a little bit tricky, but still, yeah. What else? What else? Well, I had a kind of a fun story with German tax. I had some problems with receiving the actual tax identification number. And that was exactly because I moved from one apartment to another just after 1 month in the previous apartment. So that's another whole reason to spend in a short-term apartment a little bit more than 1 month. So that's probably something I would do in a different way as well. Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, sure. So basically, you are obliged to register if you come to Germany for a prolonged period of time. And when you register at a local municipal office, at the same time, you basically register for your tax identification number. But due to German data privacy regulations, you can receive this number, or a person can receive this number only by post. And German tax regulation body reserves rights to send this number to an applicant in 4 to 10 weeks after registration. So if you move from one place to another, like in a month after you've come to Germany for the first time, you kind of create a risk of not receiving this TIN. And that, well, that's something you would probably like to avoid.
Yeah. Well, that's a really, really good, insightful point that you've made here, because I never really thought about it this way, but it's true. You don't really want to have that headache of having to wait, or knowing that your ID, your important information, such as your tax ID, is going to be sent to a different address and you might not be nearby at all. Or, yeah. So, yeah, I guess what you're saying is to rent for at least 10 weeks because, well, 8 to 10 weeks, because then you'll have more surety knowing that you'll get all of the necessary documentation required to stay in Germany.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. The only issue that one may have with renting an apartment for 3 months is that sometimes expats come with pets, and to find a short-term apartment that is pet friendly is kind of hard, you know.
It is harder. Yes. It is not easier. That's for sure.
But otherwise, if there are no limitations like this one, yeah, to rent an apartment for 2 or 3 months, it absolutely makes sense.
So if you could move wherever you wanted to, what would be your next ideal destination?
Well, I actually think that it would be also somewhere in Germany, because I have switched to a little bit different professional trajectory. And that's, well, that requires how should I put it, strict business culture. Not exactly strict, but firm business culture, so to speak. And, well, that's something that Germany provides in plenty.
Right. Well, may I ask what profession you are in?
It's data analytics. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I guess data analytics is very popular in Germany at the moment as well. Like, yeah, makes sense. Okay, so my last question to you is, what advice would you give to other expats in a similar position as you?
Okay, let me summarize. A, try to open your bank account prior to coming to Germany if you are relocating to Germany. B, try to rent a first apartment for no less than 2 or 3 months, if possible. It will save some time and will steer you away from some issues and some headache. With taxes, with looking for a more prolonged apartment, more long-term apartment, because it's definitely easier. Let me put it this way. The further the move date is from you, the easier it is to find a good option.
What would you say? What about the language barrier?
It's really good to have at least some basic knowledge of German if you're moving to Germany. From my experience, people are really open and really tolerable when you are trying to speak their language, although it is quite obvious that, well, you are not a native, or maybe you are not a intermediate speaker. That's fine. People will patiently listen to you and repeat when needed, and you'll switch to English if they speak English, if you ask them specifically. Sometimes they suggest themselves, but still, to try to speak German as much as you can, and for that to acquire some basic German, at least basic German knowledge in prior. Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Thank you for pointing it out.
Great. Well, Alexander, I really appreciate your time this evening to share the insights you gained from being an expat in Cologne. I think it's going to be really helpful for others that are going to be doing similar things. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. And I wish you a fantastic evening.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And you have a great evening and a good week ahead. Bye.